You won't believe what James Garner finally admitted about Randolph Scott, and why it says as much about Hollywood as it does about two very different men. Let's start at the beginning. James Garner wasn't born a star. He was born James Scott Bumgarner on the 7th of April 1928 in Norman, Oklahoma, a small-town kid shaped by the Great Depression. His mother died when he was 5. His father, Weldon Bill Bumgarner, did what he could, but stability was hard to come by. James bounced between relatives, picked up odd jobs, and learned early that life doesn't hand you anything, you earn it. That toughness shows up later in the roles we love him for. Decent men with a backbone, the kind who do the right thing without making a speech about it. Before acting ever crossed his mind, James Garner served. He left school at 16, worked in the Merchant Marine, and later fought in the Korean War with the U.S. Army, where he was wounded and awarded 2 Purple Hearts. The scars were real physical and emotional, but they gave him a quiet humility. He never glamorized heroism, he just did the job. And when he eventually stepped in front of a camera, that honesty came through no fuss, no fake bravado. Acting found him almost by accident. Back in Los Angeles after the war, he modeled, ran errands, helped friends on sets, and caught a talent agent's eye. No fancy drama school, he learned by doing. Then came the break that changed everything. Bret Maverick in 1957's Maverick. Suddenly, the classic Western got a twist. Garner's cowboy was charming, reluctant to draw first, always ready with a sly smile and a smarter plan. He wasn't the loudest hero, he was the clever one. Audiences ate it up. From there, James Garner could do it all. Romantic comedies like The Thrill of It All and Move Over, Darling with Doris Day, big ensemble adventures like The Great Escape with Steve McQueen. He was relatable without trying, funny without forcing it, and quietly, emotional in a way that sneaks up on you. People who worked with him called him a gentleman professional, kind, allergic to ego. Then, the 1,970 seconds gave us one of TV's greats, Jim Rockford in The Rockford Files. A private investigator who preferred brains over brawls, Rockford talked his way out of trouble until he couldn't. Garner did many of his own stunts, paid for it with injuries, and still showed up, ready to work. He won an Emmy in 1977, and the character never really left him or us. Later came the roles that proved his range was deeper than people realized. Murphy's Romance earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. The Notebook broke hearts around the world with a tender, aging husband who never gave up on love. He even returned for Maverick and Rockford reunion movies, because legacy, to him, wasn't a museum. It was alive, something you keep honoring by doing it right. Off-screen, he spoke out for actors' rights and pushed back against unfair studio tactics. He played fair, and he expected the business to do the same. Now, let's talk about the love story. Lois Josephine Fleischman Clark, often known simply as Lois Clark, met James Garner at a party in 1956. 14 dinners in a row later, he was hooked. 16 days after they met, on the 17th of August 1956, they got married. He joked he spent $77 on the honeymoon and that it about broke him. But the truth is, he'd never been richer. Lois had a daughter, Kim, from a previous marriage, and Garner stepped into the role of stepfather with that same steady kindness we'd come to expect. In 1958, the couple welcomed their daughter, Greta G.G. Garner. Their marriage lasted nearly 58 years through fame, stress, 2 brief separations, and everything life throws at a long love. They weren't perfect, but they were loyal. He often said they just needed space at times, but always found their way back. Which brings us to the moment people still talk about, what James Garner really thought of Randolph Scott. For years, Garner stayed out of Hollywood gossip. No cheap shots, no messy quotes. But when Scott's name came up in later interviews, he surprised people. He called Randolph Scott one of the most private and most misunderstood men in the business. On screen, Scott stood tall and steady, the classic Western hero. Off-screen, Garner said, the real man was even more controlled. No performative charm, no chasing headlines, just discipline, dignity, and a personal code that didn't bend for trends. Randolph Scott didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to move big to command a scene. He knew who he was, and that confidence filled the room. Garner admired that. He said Scott showed up prepared, treated everyone with respect, and did the work right every single time. In a town that runs on hype, that kind of consistency is rare. It's almost old-fashioned. Of course, that iron privacy came with a cost. Randolph Scott gave the public so little of his personal life that rumors filled the silence. Garner brushed most of them off. People made up stories because Scott didn't feed the machine, he said. He wasn't aloof, he was guarded. He believed in manners, in restraint, in letting the work speak. And it did. Decades later, the impression didn't fade. Garner also admitted Scott's reserve could feel like a wall. You could work beside him for months and still not feel like you knew him. Heart-to-heart talks? Not his style. But to Garner, that wasn't a flaw. It was authenticity. Randolph Scott never faked openness just to make people like him. He lived by a code, and you either respected it or you didn't. Garner did. Here's the thing. When James Garner, a man famous for integrity without fanfare, calls another actor steadfast, it lands. He said Scott didn't bend with the wind, didn't chase gimmicks, didn't need flash to be a leading man. He just stood there, tall and true, and you believed him. That's real acting, Garner said, and it influenced a generation more than people realize. The quiet hero, the steady center, the man who doesn't tell you who he is, he shows you. In July 2014, James Garner passed away at 86. It was heartbreakingly close to what would have been his and Lois Clark's 58th anniversary. Friends said she never truly got over the loss. She'd always been his anchor, steady, thoughtful, a quiet strength behind the scenes while he carried that same strength onto the screen. Their love story wasn't loud, it was faithful. And in a town built on spotlights, that might be the rarest thing of all. So, what's the truth James Garner told about Randolph Scott? Not a scandal, not a secret, something better. He revealed the power of a man who didn't need noise to make an impact. A man whose privacy wasn't a mystery to solve, but a boundary to honor. In Scott, Garner recognized a version of himself. The working actor, disciplined, decent, and unwavering. Different eras, different styles, but the same spine. And maybe that's the lesson. In a world obsessed with bigger, louder, and faster, the real giants are often the ones who keep it simple. Do the work, treat people right, and let your character, not your PR, define your legacy. If this story moved you, if you learned something new about James Garner, Randolph Scott, or what real on-screen integrity looks like, drop a like, share this with a friend who loves classic Hollywood, and hit subscribe for more true stories told with heart. What should we cover next? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening.